Hello and welcome back. I'd like to continue our demonstration of reading and writing internal and external memory or storage. Last time, if you remember, we completed writing the internal storage and reading from internal storage. We now want to implement writing and reading to external storage. And so here we have our Android Studio project. This was a simple application that just had some buttons that came up that allowed us to read and write. So here we just have our simple application. One bug I noticed in here is that all the buttons for writing and reading were coming up as grayed out. And this either means that our emulator is not supporting external storage, which it is because you can just test that by going to your AVD manager and selecting the emulator. You can go to your edit and just making sure that by going to the advanced settings that you're supporting an SD card, which we are right here, SD card. So in order to fix six bugs, I realized that my logic was incorrect. I have an OR statement here. That's not it. That's not right. This is saying if it's not external storage writable or it's readable. Well, it's always readable if it exists. So this is always going to gray everything out because it's saying yes, external storage is readable. So this really needed to be an AND, not an OR. And now what it's saying is if external storage is not writable and it's readable, then gray them out. And I really don't even need the readable. I really just need to say if it's not writable because it is always going to be readable. But anyways, we can fix that with the ampersands. That should be good to go. I also noticed, so if you remember from the last lecture, we have our member variable for our external file. This gets initialized in our onCreate, where we say get document dir, and before we do that we have to make sure that our external storage is writable, and we could probably put line 49 inside the if statement. So I also noticed another bug in our get document dir. In the get document dir method, which is one of our helper methods that gets the path to external storage, it was not correct. It was it's right here. And so line 83 is good. It's creating a new file from environment.getExternal storage public directory, using the directory documents final variable to find the right directory. The problem is here on line 85 I had a make directory from it. What this would do is it would create a new directory with temp.txt. So I'm able to get the new file. I'm then making a dir by calling make dirs of that file. I don't want to make a directory. I want it to be a file. So I can go ahead and delete that. And so now we're good as far as bugs go. We did add the permission for the external storage, writing external storage, but we didn't implement the runtime asking the user for external storage. If you remember that external storage is a dangerous permission. All dangerous permissions in API 23 or above, you need to ask the user at runtime if you can grant that permission. So if we were to go to the app on the emulator, and we were to see if we were granted permission for this app, we would see that we're not granted permission. So we can go to settings, and we can go to our application by going apps and notifications, and then going app info, and selecting our file external internal writing or final file writing example. And when we select this, you'll see here that we have not been granted any permissions. By just putting the permission in the manifest file, if it's a dangerous permission, does not mean you're granted that permission. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get permission to do that, to do the writing up to external storage. So we know how to do that from a previous lecture. You want to get the permission when you do the actual writing. So I'm going to ask for permission when I select the write external button. So we have to add the event handler for writing external memory, external storage. So when the user clicks that button, we want to ask for the permission. And if the permission is granted, then we're going to go ahead and write to external storage. So we have to implement this event handler. Let's paste that in. We'll paste it right in after the write and read internal and delete. So I wrote this code previously to save time. In our write external on click method, we're going to create a local variable called data, which gets all the data from the write view edit text. That's what we want to show in the read. So we want to, whatever they put inside that edit text, we want to write. Then we have to ask for permission. We know how to ask for permission. You use the context compat class, and we say check self permission, passing in this pointer for the context, and then we say write external storage, and we say if it's not equal to permission granted, then we want to ask for the permission. And that's what line 88 to 90 is doing. It's requesting the permission for write external storage. And if permission was granted, we're then going to go ahead and write out data to external storage. If permission was not granted, it's going to try to write, but it's going to fail. So when we request permission, we also have to implement the callback to see what the user said, replied. So we can implement the onRequestPermission result callback overridden method. So here in our onRequestPermission result, which we're familiar with, where it's going to send back whether or not the user was granted access. It's going to check case 12. I just put a dummy variable in there. That's going to represent the requesting of external storage. If the request is canceled, the results are empty. If the length is greater than 0 and the permission was granted, and if it's not granted, then we don't need to do anything. We can just keep it as false. So now we should run and test this. Let's build it first. What this is going to do again is it's going to request permission if it hasn't been granted, and then once it's granted, it's going to write data to the file. So now we can go into the emulator, and we can go back to our application, run it after it was built successfully. First thing you're going to notice is those buttons are no longer grayed out. So we fixed the bug with the or, changing it to an and then we want to try to write something. So let's say students are great. And let's try to write that to external. When we click the button, we don't have permission, so it's going to ask us to grant permission. We're going to say allow. And now, if we check the application inside the settings, we should see that permission was granted. If we go to the settings, apps and notifications, app info, in the file input output example. So here you see permissions and it says storage, so we were granted permission. Now that we wrote that file to external storage, we want to bring up DDMS and see if it was written to. See if the file was created. So let's bring up our Android device monitor and see if the file was created. We should have had a temp.txt file created inside of our SD card. Remember, we can't see the data directory if we didn't start ADB as root. So we have to do that first. It must have gotten reset. So if I bring up the command prompt real quick and I just go to my directory and start ADB in root mode, we have to go to users, JSON, or I'm sorry, JFEDN, app data, local, Android, SDK, platform tools. And then in here we want to say adb.exe and we want to say root to start it up as root. And now we will be able to see our data files, although data is internal storage. And if we go to storage, emulated 0, documents, we can see that temp.txt is there. And so we can pull it off the device and store it somewhere. And then look at it and see what it contains. So here we say students are great. Just to make sure it's still working, let's try testing it again with a different. Let's try students are greats. Right to external. Go back. You see that it was updated. It was updated with a different size. Pull it off. Save it. Bring it up and we see students are grades. So we're writing to external storage now. That's good. And you'll notice that I went to storage emulated documents because that's where the SD card is located on the emulator. If you go to the SD card right here, it's not inside there. That's not where it writes. It writes to the emulator for the emulator. So keep that in mind. So now we're able to write to external storage. Let's go ahead and read from external storage. And that's pretty easy. We can just use the same file directory and reuse our read method to read from external storage. So here's the read external on stick. We have our file name temp.txt, which we really don't need to keep creating because we already had as a member variable. So we can just say file name's good, new file input stream, my external, and then we want to say read data on the in stream. So my external file should already be looking at temp, so we don't even need this. So let's implement that. And while we're at it, we might as well implement the delete because the delete's pretty easy. The delete can just call the delete method on the file. A little different from the other delete for the internal because the internal just used the context to delete a file. And the name of the method was delete file. For external, you just call delete. So let's build this. And hopefully we can test writing, reading, and then deleting. Got to enable my DB. So let's try writing something different. Jason is an okay teacher. I don't want to get too full of myself. Let's write external, and then let's read external. It says Jason is an okay teacher. And let's just verify that again on DDMS, just so you know I'm not making stuff up here. So we go to DDMS. Looks like it probably closed. Hopefully it's reconnected. And we go to storage, emulated, 0 documents. And let's pull this file off. Bring it up again. And this says Jason is an okay teacher. So now let's test deleting it. Let's go back to the emulator. Let's say delete external. We try to read. It doesn't update the text. So now if we go back and we see if there's anything in emulated 0 documents, we'll see that there's nothing there. I can't maximize the directory. So there you go, a quick demo of how you can read and write your external storage. I hope you found this helpful. It's pretty basic. You use the Java I/O methods to just read and write. The data, the real important part is the open file output, open file input for internal memory, and for the external storage, you do the git directory and implement the checking of the permission. Getting the directory here is the git document dir, and that just calls git external storage public directory, or you can just say git external storage or something. Thank you.